Hey everybody, just waiting for some more people to trickle in, and then we'll get started. Thanks. Hello, hello. Okay, do you guys hear me? Okay. Test, test. 1, 2, 3. All right, cool. Excellent. Well, the video worked. It didn't have any annoying missing. Those little single frames that you miss when you export the video late at night. Seems like it worked out. So thank you all for watching and being part of the premiere. It was really fun. Um, So we'll take some questions here. I saw a lot of familiar faces in there too. I mentioned there's a lot of old forum members in there as well, and this goes back like 21 years, where we had a lot of communication. Like that was our main communication back then, was on the forum. And for those who don't know, a web forum used to be where you would post things. It was like a Reddit, and I think I had to actually pay for the forum that we had, back when things on the internet were not free. Like things actually cost money. So we had this Yuku forum. I think I was paying $20 a month for it, and and it was it was very it was very simple, and but I think a lot of us sort of made our bones on that forum, and so it was a huge joy because we really got to kind of share feedback with each other, share tips, share tricks, and so okay. First question: is there any plans to make Rope-a-Dope 3? Yeah, the difficulty with that one is always that I have a beard and I can't cut my beard for very personal and religious reasons, and so if we're gonna do a Rope-a-Dope 3, I have to have a beard somehow, which is this like crazy paradox. I don't quite know how to do that. I've got an idea. I would love to do a Rope-a-Dope 3, but for now there are no immediate plans. um, but let's see. So we got more questions coming in. Let's see. So another question was: it was more of a quick history of the new stunt fighting making movement, than the proper HK breakdown. So part two is going to have the meat and potatoes of what exactly comprises the Hong Kong and Chinese style. And yeah, I know I left a little bit of a cliffhanger. That was it's kind of intentional. I didn't want to give away everything in one go. But I think that one I've got it all written. I need to edit it. Obviously that takes a while. So give me a couple weeks, and it should be. That's been the bulk of the research, because I didn't quite understand it. I didn't have a handle on Chinese history. I'd never read a Chinese history book. I never quite understood it, and that's what all this stuff behind me is. That top shelf right there is the Chinese history stuff, and so after doing all of that, I finally have some kind of handle on some context for this stuff, and so I felt like I owed it to everybody to have a better background, a better information repository before I said anything. And yeah, these take a long time, but I mean they're kind of like they're not these aren't just like these aren't just like daily videos. These are things that take. I think this one has been taking me like almost 2 months. So I appreciate your patience. How did you even think to come up with this video? The 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 reason I came up with it is because I, when I went from doing, Blindsided, right? I was doing Blindsided, Rope It Up 2, and then I went into doing God of War. And the, I'll give a little bit of a spoiler alert. Um, the movement style that I had trained myself in for up until that point, like 15, 16 years, was not working for God of War. The general kind of character and attitude was working, but the movement was not. and they schooled me day by day by day by day. And when you get schooled like that as a stunt performer, which is also a little bit rare, as a stunt performer to get the attention on you like that, where someone's actually trying to drill you and make you better and change you. Also, it's like doing kung fu for 15 years and then going and doing a traditional Japanese sword class, and you start going, bah, 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 you start swinging the sword around like a Chinese sword, and the teacher's just like, no, no, you are not getting out of here until you do this right. And what that does is it kind of rewires your brain, and it's like you're learning a new language, because every time I made a movement, my thought that went into the movement was different. When I was doing God of War movement, when I do a Hong Kong style movement, the thought I have going into a movement, into a combo, whatever it might be, I think a certain way. It's like you're making a sentence. You're forming a sentence before you say anything. Same thing with moving, doing an attack, violence. You are forming a violent sentence in your head, and then you execute it. And that's all predicated upon various things. And that difference that I was going through when I went from the Hong Kong style to God of War, it actually helped me to see American action differently, and I started understanding American action better. And the same thing happened when I went into Demon Souls, the Japanese style movement. Started seeing Japanese style action very differently, and so that inspired this idea of putting together a movement language and kind of documenting the whole thing. Not just breaking down how to do these movement styles, but like what it is that's fueling this movement language. I'll stop there because otherwise I'm going to spoil it too much. Do I still follow the old Stunt People Forum guys? Vlad, Steve Reedy, Zero Gravity. I don't know if Zero Gravity still makes stuff, do they? I still talk to Steve, still talk to Vlad. Big fan of what Vlad does, because he takes that. He's like this very. He's a very. He's like a cobbler, you know, and that's how I think too. Just like, let's just find all the stuff that works, and take the stuff that works from these things and put it together. And I like thinking like that. So, and he's come up with a very different solution than I have, right? He combined the Korean with, very like Samo style choreography, and then there's some Indian stuff in there now too. So yeah, I'm a big fan of what he does. And Reedy's always just had an amazing eye. I still keep in touch with him. He still does great stuff. Let's see, you kind of hint at looking at several other movement styles and the idea how many parts this is going to wind up being. Love the analysis. Well, I would like to do 2 parts for this one. Part B is going to come next, which is what comprises the Hong Kong Chinese style. I'm going to break down the Hong Kong versus the Chinese style as well, and there's going to be some Taiwan stuff in there as well. I'll do then 2 on the American style. I might just do 1 on the Japanese. I might do 2. I'm not sure. Depends on how deep it goes. I would like to do Korean as well. I'll do 1 on Korea. And then maybe another episode on India, Thailand. Just kind of like bucketing them all together. Not that they're less important, but because I just frankly have less experience in them. It's stuff that I just know less about. But at that point, we're sort of converging upon like what can become a movement grammar. So, yeah, I don't know. 10 episodes? I have no idea. In the end, though, it's all going to be put together also as one, so you can just watch the whole thing all the way through. Hey, thank you for the donation, $20. I appreciate. Let's see, I still share Rope-a-Dope. Any chance you can get? We can see you against Scott, or would you do a movie like Kung Fury 2? Thank you, Mr. Martinez. I talked to Scott a fair amount. And we are always trying to find something where our worlds can come together. It's possible. It's definitely possible. So we'll see. It's tough too because, I'm the creative director at my studio and co-founder here. So for me to leave for more than a week is very difficult. So I tend to just be here now, which is like a blessing in so many ways, but it does make it difficult to go, overseas for a month. Even in a month is short for a film, in my opinion. I mean, I would like to, if I'm gonna do an action movie, I'd like more than a month, but I know that's difficult. But then it becomes very difficult to leave here. Did those old VHS videos like Police Story have good subtitles? Like, were you able to understand the story, or did you only care about the action? I didn't quite know how to follow the story for some of those. I think that there's a lot of context that was lost in especially wuxia films, where for just like a for just like a small town American like me, I didn't quite understand like what wuxia even meant, why people flew around. I didn't get it. So even if I could kind of follow the story, I didn't have the context. I didn't understand the history. I was really badly educated about this stuff. Like I mentioned, like my skills traditionally have not been in history. I have to really apply myself to something if I want to learn anything, and so I just would continually fail history, and so I never learned anything about history when I was young. And but the more kind of westernized stories like the Sammo Hung movies and the Jackie Chan films, those are much easier to understand, and those stories are Jackie's films are very western. Right? It's all character for him. Um, Sammo's films are a little bit more Chinese, but it was still kind of in these western contexts that were easier to follow. The main thing when I would do the reviews though was action, because all of the other websites out there at the time, this is back in 1999, all the other websites, and I remember there was Ron Lim, Project J, and there was another one, it was like Bullets Over Hong Kong. Somebody would probably remember that. But there was another, City on Fire was another one. There was Kung Fu Cinema, which is still around. And I would, all of those sites, they would review the story and they'd give great context. Rick Myers, his book has got a lot of context with stories. But I figured, well, I could have a competitive edge if I just focus on the action. So that was my main focus for the reviews, and it sort of just became my focus personally as a result. Because yeah, I'm the kind of guy that like if I don't understand something fully, I don't really understand any of it. So if there's a story where like I kind of understand 50% of what's going on, I just don't remember any of it. So yeah, I didn't really focus on the story. But now that I understand the history, now that I've read a couple history books about China now, I think that I could probably go back and watch all 500 of those movies and just enjoy them way more than I did before. It's kind of a shame. I'll never have time to do it again. Oh, and thanks for the donation. Now that you've tried so many styles, is it easier to switch between them? Like from going to the God of War mocap action back to the Pizza Time, for example. Yeah, it's like it's kind of like just learning a language. When you learn a new language and um, like I learned Cantonese for 3 years, and I wasn't fully immersed in it, but when you learn a language and a lot of you are multilingual, so you understand this. But when you learn a new language, you might think in that language sometimes, and if you can go back and forth thinking like English, like Cantonese, well, then there's this kind of ability to code switch, right, depending on situations. So I didn't really have a hard time um, going back. What I do find, though, is that there's some stuff from the God of War style movement that I always want to bring now into the Hong Kong style. We recently worked on a game. I can't talk about which one it was. I'm just going to stop talking about that right there. But anytime I now bring up, anytime I'm now doing like one style or the other, I'm always trying to bring something, like the character stuff from the American style, which was always kind of there, but now I understand it in a better context, and like not just character, but like the momentum and the vector, that the vector sort of. I don't know. There's something about American style action where it's like wrecking balls hitting each other, right? And so there was some discussion in the chat earlier about the Hong Kong style without character is just empty movement. Totally agree with that. American style is sort of predicated primarily on character without regards to the other person. So it doesn't really consider what the other person's going to do. And that's more in line with kind of like standard American mocap, because in fact you're just sort of like performing like that when you're doing shots anyway. You're just sort of acting like you're just winning. You're just assuming you're gonna win. That's kind of this American style, and you get to throw all this character into that. When you have to dance with somebody, yes, you can have character, but there is this sort of like sliding scale, right? Where the more collaborative and the more cooperative you get, the more the characters kind of blend into each other. It's just sort of a natural result of that, right? And like the great Hong Kong action is the one where it's like there's still cooperation, but there's still character, right? And this is not a normative statement on you know Chinese action is worse than American action. It's not it at all. But when you're just naturally going to be on that continuum somewhere, and that's just the nature of it. So yeah, how far do you push that one direction or the other? Jackie Chan was a little bit pushed more on the American side, and Sam was pushed a little bit more on the Chinese side. Yuen Woo-ping would be a little bit further Chinese side because it was more about the aesthetics to Yuen Woo-ping. And then if you go too far off in that direction where it's all about aesthetics, then it's sort of like the character becomes the dance, which can be fine too. But again, that's like, where is that in your story? And does that make sense for your story? If it doesn't make sense for your story, don't do that action. And that's sort of the difficulty of importing Hong Kong style action into American cinema, because if you have a very American story where it's very character driven and it's about, I don't know, like the American storytelling is a little bit different, right? It's a little bit less traditional. It's a little bit more about somebody like pulling himself up by his bootstraps and just making it work, and he's an underdog and whatnot. And then importing a Hong Kong action into that might be strange. And it's been tried. I think sometimes directors will find that, like, okay, we have a very American style character, but he's doing a very Hong Kong style, and it just doesn't fit. And sometimes it does. That was a long-winded answer, but that's another spoiler for the next series. All right, is there a place in the world right now where you feel like an industry is really pushing movement design in a way where none of the others are? Oh, yeah. There's one. There's this small group in Japan. Don't quote me on this. I think they're associated with Kurata-san. And they're doing this like crazy movement style. They did a movie called Hydra. They did another one, Baby Assassins. And it's pushing a boundary that is very unique. There's not a whole lot of danger in it yet. Like, it still seems a little bit too cooperative. Like in Hydra, the fights go on for so long and they're so chaotic, but like not many hits land, and there's a knife fight and it goes on, but there's not really any cutting, so the danger is not quite there. But the technique is so good. The technique is so good. Like, there's this thing that happens all the time in American fights and Hong Kong fights. It's the jab cross hook. So when you're doing jab cross hook against somebody, and the person that you're fighting against is supposed to dodge, bob and weave, and duck. Well, what always happens, what should be this, punching right here where the target is, inevitably it ends up being this. They cross like this because you're anticipating the performer moving in a direction. You naturally just kind of push your fist off in the other direction. And what it is, it's just like a law of magnetism. But what they're doing in these Japanese fights is they are going to the mark, man, and they're making people get out of the way. It looks really cool. So I'm looking forward to more of what they do. Again, Hydra. Look up the team that did Hydra. That's really exciting stuff. I think that that could be another raid style opportunity if a good filmmaker teams up with that action team and makes a killer story and gets them for like 6 weeks, right? Because they're making these movies in a week. Like Hydra, I think they've shot it in 5 days or something. They have no time, right? They are not making the raid because they just don't have time for whatever reason. So I mean, maybe you could bring that team to Indonesia, to Thailand, and then just make a movie there. I don't know. I see a huge opportunity there. I also think that I'm holding out a lot of hope for India because there's a lot of great up and coming stunt guys there. Like, they're learning, they're really learning, and stunt women who are learning how to move. When we did Man Who Feels No Pain over there was a moment where I was like, when we were shooting the end fight, and I was going, this could be like the next place, right? That could be the next place. I think that there are some other hurdles, institutional hurdles to get over before it can really be there. But who knows? Get Ali. Do you find that movement styles change significantly when weapons are added? I don't think so. I think that even in the Chinese style, the name of the game is going to be shapes and cooperation. Tends to be like there's a little bit of the heroic bloodshed stuff where yeah you can get a little bit dirtier now with the weapons because you're naturally kind of going into this darker territory where you're actually tapping into real warfare. So the memories are going to be a little bit different. So it's probably a little bit less cooperative. I think wushu weapons is where wushu choreography totally excels. Um, there are a few. There haven't been like many great wushu martial art films, but like looking at Jet Li's stuff from the 80s, the the weapon choreography that they do, and especially in martial arts of Shaolin, it's just like I don't know. I think to this day, I don't know if you can beat it. I mean, it's just incredible. Um, Donnie Yen's stuff with Guan Yu's the choreography and the Lost Bladesman. Yeah, I think that stuff you actually get a little bit rawer now that I'm thinking about it. Um, American style weapons again. It tends to be kind of like the heavy wrecking ball style choreography. Now here's the difference though. So American action is not like monolithic, right? You have various kind of lineages of American action because you have on the one hand you have the cowboys, which is sort of like rebooting civilization, right? And like the horrors of warfare in the old west and the kind of cowboy style movement. And then you also have the East Coast movement that was imported from Europe with Shakespeare's swashbuckling. So like a lot of early American swashbuckler films, swordplay films. Godali's made one recently. I can't wait for it to come out. It's really good. It also comes across as a little bit cooperative because they were sort of mixing in the Olympic style fencing. But then you also have the Braveheart style, right? So there's a lot of codes that you can tap into with all these places, right? You look at like triad style fights in Hong Kong films. Those are not very cooperative, but they are based in triad warfare. And let's not just pick on the triads. Let's just say secret societies, right? Because triads weren't the only secret societies, and they weren't always violent, right? A lot of them were just like Elks Lodge organizations. Like they didn't kill each other, but like a few triads did. So that's a good question. Very good question. Tekla, what do you think made the raid so special to American audiences to get it to the extent that most people know it and love it? Well, I think that they had a very good, just business-wise, they had a very smart distribution campaign. They also had a great package, right? Like you have this sort of, second world country that not many people really know about. It's very foreign. The main actor's Muslim. He's a man of faith, and he's fighting for his family. Like there's just something that touched a lot of people. I think it was very unique. Like, not many movies begin with a guy praying. So I think like even like non-Muslims looked at that and they go like, yeah, okay, that's me. A lot of people kind of tapped into that. I think the combination of Gareth and the martial art team, and that martial art team, they had done something together with Gareth in a previous film. I think what really works about that movie is the stuff in between the fights, because that story is fantastic. And all the moments in between the fights. And the fights themselves, like technically great. But I think that if you were to take that movie and take out all the fights and put them over here, and take out all the stuff in between the fights and put them over here, I think that the fight stuff would sort of be seen as like just another action movie. But the stuff, even if you had that entire movie without those fights, and you had all that stuff in between, like the going through the floor and the machete against the face thing and the revolver at the beginning, I think that still would have been a good film. So, and you can kind of see this because that team went and did more movies like that, and it didn't quite have the same story. Like, I mean, there's one that's like really, really over the top. The Night Comes for Us, I think it's called. Really terribly brutal fights, but not just the story is not. It's not the same. It just didn't touch people. So, story's everything. Story's everything. Solid Cloud. Gareth killed it with Gangs of London 2. Oh man, if you guys want to see some of the most traumatic action in human history, Gangs of London Season 1 is like some of the most. I haven't seen season 2, but season 1 has got the. It's probably got the most traumatic action I've ever seen. Yeah, like in terms of totally uncooperative action style, like it really like that actually seems kind of like like that's a British action style, like new British. Yeah, I mean it's unbelievable. Fernando, hello Eric. Why didn't you imitate Eddie's movements in Tekken 3? Because it's impossible. Like, I'll never do that one. I'll just hire a capoeira guy. I'll never do Eddie. There's no way. Well, maybe someday. Maybe someday I'll be a capoeira expert and I can do it. I gotta get through these quicker. Man, there's a lot of questions. Sorry. Tell them on high. What would you say is the main difference between Japanese and Hong Kong style action? As a fan of Japanese action movies, I see a lot of influences, but I can't put my finger on the difference. Okay. I'll just give a quick teaser. Japanese action is rooted much more recently in real warfare. I think that the lineage from warfare to cinema, there's literally like one intermediary step, and it's very traceable. You have samurai, chambara and theater and kabuki, film. And so the mode of movement, right? Like the idea. Look, you have samurais. You have these stunt guys at Toei, right? They lived together in the 50s, for example. Well, they had grandfathers who probably remembered samurai lifestyle, right? And they would just choreograph. Now, of course, Chambara was not exactly choreographed like real swordplay because it had to be safe. But the thinking behind doing a movement, despite the technique, right? Because like the way that Chambara works is you don't really attack the target, right? Like if you like when you are doing Chambara fighting, you as the camera right now, if you are performing in the fight scene and I'm supposed to do an overhead cut, I would not do this. I would not cut. I don't want to break my ceiling. I would not cut like this, right? We would not do this. We would meet here and then push down because for safety reasons, right? A lot of the time too, the main character was just an actor, and the stunt performers had to train this actor. And you know, the actor learned 8 moves. You know, they call it the mai, the rice pattern plus a stab, and then there'd be a pattern of those that you can memorize. It's very very similar also to fencing in European theater. But the thinking that went into each one of those moves, it's not the same. It's just not the same kind of thinking as when you're moving in a Hong Kong style. Because in a Hong Kong style, you are planning ahead 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 moves. But the proper Chambara style is that you do the move and you wait for the next move. That just means that it's sort of tied more closely to the origins of war. So the proper way of doing Japanese style of action, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong. You know, I've talked to a bunch of people about this too. Some of you are in the chat right now. We've had late night conversations trying to figure out like what it is that separates Hong Kong and Chinese style. But what I keep seeing is that like the great Japanese martial artists, there's less of an emphasis on making a song. There's more of an emphasis on that individual move looking like it's supposed to kill and then waiting to see if it killed, or waiting to see what the next thing is. There's very little telegraphing. Yeah, casual katana at the computer desk. Yeah. You know how it goes. Bruce, just wanted to thank you for such amazing content. Thank you, appreciate that, Bruce. Opinion on the John Wick franchise? I think John Wick is it's a great franchise. It's a fantastic character, and it pioneered a new kind of silhouette, which is this thing with the gun, and this thing, and it had been done before that, but it really kind of codified it into a character that made sense. What people need to be cautious of is taking this silhouette and putting it in everything else. You don't necessarily have to do the super tactical like three gun training. You don't have to do that all the time, and a lot of stuff now does that. And sometimes it's just cooler to do a nice silhouette. Like sometimes you should do John Woo. Like that stuff was totally fine in the '90s in America. We did a lot of great silhouettes, Desperado, Isaac Florentine stuff. Quentin Tarantino stuff, like big silhouettes, not tactical. It's all character, right? If the character is tactical, that's one thing. But if the character is not tactical, like don't make him tactical. Han Solo, how's he point? He goes like this. It's not tactical at all. And like don't be afraid of doing that. If somebody's gonna call you out and say that doesn't work in the ring, right? That kind of crap, like ignore them. And that's not John Wick's fault. John Wick just made now a lot of people religious adherents to that kind of movement. Thomas, how different do you feel the language and movement change with the advent of BJJ or just a growing general appreciation of grappling by the audiences? I still don't know if anybody knows quite how to shoot BJJ, Jiu-Jitsu. But I don't think that Jiu-Jitsu is what changes the movement language. I think that the movement language changed just with the advent of mixed martial arts in general. And that's what you saw with... It had to start simply with Tony Jaa and Ong Bak. I think that just hit at the right time. 2003, I remember that time period. About then, in my hometown. In my hometown in 2001, when we were making these martial art movies behind... out back behind mechanics shops, you get these hicks coming out. They say, "Hey, what you doing? You doing Chuck Norris?" But then, 2 years later, all those dudes knew what a triangle choke was because they would watch MMA at the bar. So there was some kind of shift there, and I think that shift is going to align with some level of added realism with movement, because you're gonna want to tap into what people kind of know. It allows you to be a little bit more subtle now. With American action, like a film like Warrior, for example, probably the greatest MMA film, and that's a movie that general American audiences understand. Thank you, Solid Cloud, for the donation. Elwin, do you have Fight Seeing Eindhoven as well? Is that a short? Is that the short that you made? You'll have to clue me in on what that is. Yaka. Anyway, do you watch any of the Martial Club? I've been watching Martial Club for forever, man. They're keeping the style alive. Have you considered having a Patreon? No, not really interested. Thank you though. Will you cover They Live? Absolutely. I will absolutely cover They Live. I think that's a quintessential American action fight scene, because it's all character, it's all story, and it's got 5 moves. It can teach you a lot. Stan, hey Stan. Hey Eric, what is your preference and style if you compare Jackie Chan's Protector American fight scene versus the Hong Kong fight scene? You know what's funny, man? Every time I watch the American version of Protector, it's 10% slower. But there's a moment, it gets me every time. It's when Bill Wallace walks up to Jackie at the beginning of that fight. And I think in the American version, it's very slow. And it gives me goosebumps every time. There's character there. And again, that's just something sometimes where American directors and DPs have a good handle on this, where they know kind of how to build, even though they know nothing about the martial arts, but there's something about that moment where he walks up to Jackie that gives me goosebumps. It doesn't happen in the Hong Kong version. Hong Kong version, technically awesome, way more fun, but in terms of just visceral feeling, yeah, there's something about that American one that's this is a little bit different, a little bit special. You still working with the same group of guys? I see some of the guys. A lot of the Bay Area guys. They have wives and kids now, and they full-time jobs. But still work with Dennis, and try and keep as much of the team around. But, keep in mind we're 40 now, so a lot of people have gone their own way. Rope-a-dope 3. I've already mentioned that. It'll be at the beginning. It's one of the first questions I asked at the beginning of this. Would you ever do an analysis on Jet Li's action evolution? Yeah, I think Jet Li's a really interesting dude because, and I'm going to mention it a little bit in the next episode, where, what's different about Jet, how do I say this? like Jet is a very dramatic martial art actor, and um, there's something very, what would you say, very operatic about his movement that is not quite the same as the Hong Kong style operatic movement. The Hong Kong style operatic movement, like the head movements are sharp and they direct you to where you need to look. Jet's head movements they're just big, and his foot movements are big. And his shapes are not quite the same as the Hong Kong style, but his ability to just sort of be this machine gunner makes him really appealing. But the thing is, though, there aren't many wushu people who have been able to do that. I think that pound for pound, you just don't get the same output from the Beijing slash wushu style. You have to cross train, and maybe Jet cross trained, but also that was a generation that was a generation of wushu performers who they were like a different kind of like level. They didn't have the triple twists, but they had flavor. There was character to their movement. And maybe there's something, and I don't quite know what happened there. Like maybe there's something about like the wushu curriculum or the way that things were being judged and scored that like reduced character and increased technique. And then there's a big convergence towards everybody doing the same techniques. I'm sure sport karate is the same way. I'm not an expert in sport karate, but maybe that's got the same trend where things just kind of like veer towards like pure technique and away from character. And I see that now with a lot of sport karate performers who they all move the same way now. And Jet was at that early stage with Yu Hai, and that bearded dude, the Tai Chi sword guy, who's just beautiful movement. And they had so much character. You know, all three of them on screen at the same time at the end of Martial Arts of Shaolin. It's like three different people fighting. But you look now at three-person wushu acts, everybody moves the same. And I'm not sure that they know how to differentiate themselves in a fight anymore. It's really difficult. And the other thing too about the wushu style movement, this is the last one I'm going to harp on wushu, is that it's so disciplined. It's so kind of concerned with metrics, because it is sort of this like exercise method that it gets really difficult to train movements out of people, and you have to be kind of a freak if you're a wushu performer. And then you come in and like if you do mocap, you're doing wushu for 10 years, and then you come and do mocap, and here's what happens. I'm gonna use my trusty sword again, right? You're supposed to do a sword attack, right? Now here's the wushu style, right? You're gonna cut, and then you're gonna look, and then back to idle. That will be, well, if I tell you I need you to cut, slowly look, and then ease back into idle, it's really hard for them. They'll go they can't, they don't have like between the 1 and the 10. They can only do 10. And I need you to do 4 on this one. Okay, now I need you to do 6. It's really hard, and that's movement, that's vocabulary, movement vocabulary. And when you kind of instill pure discipline into people and their movement style, you're going to get this incredibly technical movement style, but you're going to lose that space between 1 and 10. It's just sort of a natural byproduct of that when you have a curriculum like that. I think that the wushu curriculum right now, for whatever reason, it's just not producing great stars. I mean, feel free to point out someone else, prove me wrong. I mean, Wu Jing was like the last one. Brad Allen was a wushu guy also. But again, these are like guys out of the 90s. A little bit different time. Anyway, Jet Li is a fascinating character. And it's interesting, too, to look at how Yuen Woo-ping really brought him on as his muse. Because Yuen Woo-ping was old school Beijing opera because his father was from Beijing. Came to Guangzhou, had his children there, because of political reasons probably. And then Yuen Woo-ping's entire MO is to make an opera troupe and then find his headliner. And he went through who? He went through Jackie Chan, Sammo Hung, Yuen Biao, Donnie Yen, Jet Li, Michelle Yeoh. He went through all these headliners. He was like a talent manager in the old school opera sense, and really kind of found his muse with Jet Li, who was from Beijing. It's kind of interesting to look at that. You might talk about this. Oh, Eric, thank you for the $10. Much appreciated, man. Thanks for the book too. You might talk about this in part two, but do you consider the mainland style to be too different than the Hong Kong style, especially as classic Hong Kong directors move more and more into mainland for money? Well, I think now you have like a pretty good, probably a pretty good talent base in the mainland because a lot of people do MMA there now. Like it's MMA is huge there in mainland China. I think that you're not really going to get like the traditional styles anymore because they just don't have, they don't quite, they've kind of lost their steam. They've been, they were kind of weeded out. They were weeded out in multiple phases. They were weeded out from the Boxer Rebellion. Right, the Boxer Rebellion told everybody like, oh wait a minute, everybody's doing this mystical mumbo jumbo, pretending like they have iron shirt and then they get shot and they die. So we're gonna like start moving away from these very traditional movements and get into much more secularized movements. Jingwu Moon is kind of founded upon this idea that martial arts should be secularized. They took traditional Chinese medicine out of it. And this is before the communists. This is during the nationalists, right? Like right at the beginning. So there were multiple waves of sort of the purging of the traditional elements of martial arts. It wasn't just the communists. I'm no fan of them, but I'm no fan of what they did. But like they weren't the only ones. And so the result then is that you have a big diaspora of traditional martial artists that are trying to maintain this tradition and try and find like a reason to do these kind of movement styles throughout America. There's a lot in South America also, Australia, Vancouver, right? But then once you sort of lose the purpose of doing the traditional movement, then you're just naturally going to have, you're just going to kind of have a dwindling effect of that. And then it's sort of only natural that Beijing Wushu as a curriculum is just going to overtake it. And Beijing Wushu was not created by the communists. Like that was going on for a long time in the North as like an exercise method, and also kind of like as part of understanding operatic movements in general in the North. So I think that you can still find a lot of good stunt performers in China. Like those dudes are still hard, without a doubt. When I was over there in Beijing, all the stunt guys were working on Great Wall at the time, but even like the guys off, just like the random guys that would come in, like a lot of them were trained in MMA and they'd hit the deck, man. They would hit hard, like they didn't care. That doesn't make them technically great, but I think that there's still a chance. But I don't know if there's ever going to be like a rekindling of the old Chinese style movement. I think that might be gone. I've seen Donnie's new movie Sakura. I have not. Looking forward to it though. How much do you think, this is from Steven, how much do you think the rhythm of the fight affects the story or the style of the fight? Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's the right direction of story. It used to be the direction I would take. Now there's nothing wrong. The way I would plot out a fight now is I do like 80%, try and do like 70-80% plotted out. Like here are our story beats. Here's our characters, right? We have these vectors, these characters. This person wants this, but this person wants this. Okay? And they're going to hit here. They're going to hit at these various points. There's going to be a disagreement. And then you can kind of have those disagreements kind of play out into those next beats. But then you do need to allow the aesthetics to drive it a little bit. And sometimes, that movement will dictate a camera move, and that camera move might dictate moving into another area. So that's why I try and leave like 20 to 30% kind of up for that, seeing where the fight goes. Because sometimes then that takes you away from it feeling like a storied, very Hollywood, beat out fight scene, and it can introduce like a moment of danger, for example, or a moment of just like where how did that happen? Like suddenly they hit a wall, or suddenly something happens. That stuff can really add. So I'd do 70-30. Fernando, sorry if you already answered this, but I'd like to know what kind of martial arts you practice. What is your basic martial art? Taekwondo. Were you a gymnast? Thanks. First thing I did was weightlifting. Then I took gymnastics. I didn't do very well in gymnastics because I was really stiff, but I could do rings and floor pretty well. Then I did springboard diving. I took Kempo for about a month when I was 13 at a strip mall. Got my yellow belt. Basically, by the time I was 18, my martial arts sucked, but I could fall. And then when I was 19, I took Taekwondo. Did that for a couple years, and then I started taking Hapkido. And from there, it's just been learning whatever styles I need to learn. Took some Iaido also, but a lot of it is just training to do movies. I mean, a lot of us get into martial arts for movies. Let's just admit it, and that was one of the reasons I did. The Hapkido we did is traced to Myeongjae Nam, so there's a lot. It's a lot more circular, but there's a lot of kicking in it too. So, Dante, you mentioned something about Sammo and the pedicab driver, where he was real experimental with Thunderbolt. What was that slow down motion technique he used in the film in the '90s? Well, that's just frame doubling, I think. Where I think what he would do, like the way that you double frames like that, because essentially when you watch that, it's like 12 frames per second or something. That was probably to hide the stunt double, because Jackie was doubled all throughout Thunderbolt because he was injured. But the way that you shoot that, I mean, I think you just shoot that at 12, and then you just project it back at 24, basically. No, then you double frames and then you project it back at 24. Gotta go. You're the reason I started following anybody on YouTube at First Channel. Found out. Thank you for that. You're welcome. You're probably gone by now, though. Any thoughts on Shu Haofeng and stuff like Sword Identity and Judge Archer? Yeah, some of that stuff's cool. You know, like there's a lot of egg on some of the guys in the background. That was also the Master. There's some interesting stuff there. It looks like he's trying to go kind of for the more originary purpose of the weapons instead of, you know, not really thinking about, like, well, let's not think about the silhouettes that we know within the forums, and let's not watch the DVD tutorials and the Black Belt magazine stuff. Like, let's just look at the weapon. Okay, so what do we got? We got a blade here. All right. Well, what parts of the blade do we have? Okay, well, we have a hilt, and we have a blade here, and we have a point here. And we also have a scabbard. So, like, what elements of this can actually be used in a fight? And then just sort of play upon that instead of, you know, idealizing it, right? So I think that stuff's pretty interesting. I like it overall. Martinez, thank you. $10. What about Bruce? I felt like he had an American style in HK at that time. American style. Bruce. Oh, Bruce Lee. Yeah, Bruce is, for all intents and purposes, Chinese American. And, you know, bear in mind too. Also, check out the movement, the action essay I did on him. But one of the things that I didn't really mention in that was that you know, a lot of his movement style was based on the tournament karate that was coming into the States in the late 60s, because a lot of guys, like, you know, were coming from the Vietnam War and the Korean War and bringing martial arts over to the States, and they're stationed in Japan. And the earliest forms of these tournaments were point sparring. So a lot of Bruce's techniques were point sparring techniques. So a lot of his hook kicks, a lot of the stuff he does is like very, very point sparring. Nothing wrong with that, but that was kind of what his inspiration was. But yeah, a lot of his movement style was very American. He had a vector. He was a wrecking ball, and a lot of that's Japanese too. Like that, this is a guy who like took everything, took anything that worked, and then put it into his own format. I think that after the Green Hornet, he probably sort of like figured this out better. Green Hornet is like he's moving in a very Chinese way, and then by the time he's doing Enter the Dragon, you know, it's kind of like peak Bruce. Any thoughts on the rise of HEMA as a cinematic language? Right now, only Adoria, I don't know who that is really doing it, but nightly, historically accurate fencing has been gaining popularity on popular media. But the thing that I wonder about that is like how in demand that is. Because I think as Americans, yeah, okay, there's some general level of understanding, but I think like most Americans don't fence. Europeans fenced. There's actually a good book about that. I'll find it. Is it this one? Yeah. Yeah, stage combat, sword fighting from Shakespeare to present. And in Europe, you know, you would get people in the audience critiquing the sword fight, saying it's not realistic, right? Because they had a history of dueling, for example. And their history of warfare had been fairly recent. In America, I think that we're much more critical of guns. in gun combat. The way that we and critical and like also critical not just in terms of form but also like content. Right? They shouldn't be showing that because we understand the horrors of it. I think that other places that don't understand the horrors of gun combat, they're probably going to be more liberal with how they depict gunplay. So yeah, it's interesting. What I just wonder is that if you were to do accurate HEMA, which is European style fighting, European style weapon fighting, if you did accurate HEMA in a film like Duelists, right? Great example, Duelists, in my opinion. Then if you do it, then well, how much is that actually going to touch people? Be curious. Korean action film recommendation from is it Orphan Pixels? Yeah, I mean I love City of Violence, man. That's my Korean film recommendation. City of Violence. What else? What else? I don't know. The Veteran. The Veteran's great. Outlaws. It's one of my favorites. There's so many Korean action movies though. Like I can't keep up with all of them. There's so many, and I don't know why. Like how do they make so many movies? And they're all like 2.5 hours long. I wish there would be fewer and that they were 90 minutes each. John says, "Man from Nowhere." Yes, Man from Nowhere is good. Bruce, how can one collab with you? Would love to be a service if suitable. Yeah, thank you. Like email us through the website, and maybe we can make something work. What do you think of Gareth Evans? Yeah, I love him as a storyteller. I think that he's top of his game. I think he made a wise choice in going to Indonesia and picking a ragtag group of martial artists and making an action movie for 3 months. He's a smart dude. Be curious to see what he. I hope he keeps making, action films. Nice comments. Let's see. There's some like nice comments in here. Appreciate it, Miko. And John, thank you. Yeah, the SP reviews. Somebody asked if the reviews are still available online. You can get them through archive.org. I think they're still there, and I still have them locally, but I don't know if I have them all. Hey Lucas, action review is a service that the industry is missing really bad. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how many people are reviewing action. I know that. I don't know. Maybe that's something that I was thinking that would be kind of a fun. It'd be kind of a fun. It'd be kind of fun to do. Action breakdowns, just like as a show on the channel. How many people are in chat right now? 62 people right now. You guys want me to do a live breakdown? We can do a live breakdown if there's anything that you guys want. Like, we could do No Tears for the Dead. Yeah, that's another good one. Okay, so let me do this one. I got a good one for you. I'm gonna break down Royal Warriors. The reason I'm doing it is because it's a cross section of Hong Kong and Japanese style. So let me pull it up real quick here. So let's see, Royal, and it's got one of the best performers of all time, Hiroyuki Sanada. Royal Warriors, where are you? There we go. All right, and I'm just gonna break down the plane scene. See which one is it? They're the same. All right, so let's see. So give me 1 second. Here we go. Okay. All right. Okay. So you see that? There we go. So Operation Scorpio. Let's see. Let's get to the meat of the fight where it gets really good. By the way, I'm just going to show this fall. This is one of the most insane falls ever put on camera. This one. That's Laugalung, but oh wait, that wasn't the fall. That one's nasty too. There's a fall that Chinkarlok does. Chinkarlok is he is the 80s fall shape guy. This one. This is actually worth noting. That's nasty. That's probably Chinkarlok. And Chinkarlok could he's the guy that would always double people for those huge falls in Sammo Hung's movies, and he was on, he was in Hong Gaban, and but I think that kind of shape of like being out of control and just falling to your death, and that is a shape of 80s action cinema in Hong Kong. It sort of helps define the genre. So let's move on to action here. So this fight's choreographed by Lau Galarng. Pops right there. And yeah, Kim Won Jin's interesting because again, he's just like he. There's something about the Korean style where they could adapt. Oh, Hwang Jung-lee, obviously, like one of the greatest villains of all time, and like Hwang Jung-lee, he does Eagle Claw, he does Tiger Claw, he'll do Snake, he'll do all this stuff, but he never took those martial arts. He could just sort of like fake it, and he talks about it. He says he had some kind of technique where he could copy martial arts styles really easily, and I don't know what that says about Chinese style. Like you don't get quite like you're not going to get the same level of you're not going to get the same angles as someone like Lau Galarng, but you'll get kind of like 80% there. So there's something about like the Korean style of movement where they were able to translate very easily from Korean movement into Hong Kong movement. And then Kim Won Jin would go back to South Korea, and he'd do like a very South Korean 90s style action scene. Yeah, so and he did quite a few Hong Kong action films. Here, let's get into it. Let's see the yeah, his kicks were top notch. The Guyver kick. Oh, yeah. Here, I'm trying to get into some shapes and some shoe leather here. Not a whole lot of shoe leather in this though. Anyway, that's that. Let's get. We got some more questions here. Let's go. Let's just hide this one now. There we go. Eric Jacobus, why do you figure judo isn't that used in Japanese movies? You see unironically and more on the American movies alongside a classic judo chop. Huh. Never thought about that. But karate, even like when I was doing the Bruce Lee one, I was trying to find Japanese karate movies, and like they didn't exist. Like, what's that about? Like, why don't you have you have an art, and yet for what 40, 50 years they don't even use it in cinema? Like, it's kind of crazy. So who knows? I don't know why. Judo is also. Because judo is something that cops use, right? So you see judo in, Takeshi Kitano movies. You see it in just random cop dramas. So maybe it's like maybe they just don't make a meal out of it, right? They just don't see a reason to do that. Because to them it's like handcuffs. It's like shooting a gun. I just want to say that as a Brazilian, I'm frustrated by the fact that we only have Besoro as a martial art flick. We have plenty of martial artists and martial art fans. There is a knife fighting movie that's Brazilian. I think it's American, but it was done in Brazil. I can't remember what it's called though. It's from 1993 or so. It's got a terrible title. Like it's unsearchable. It's like The Master or something. Totally unsearchable. But that's the only other one I can think of. And there's also the those SWAT films that were done in Brazil, which is very. They're not martial art movies, but there is sort of an action style to that. I hope Brazil does some more. I hope they do more, because even Besoro, I think. Yeah, only this. Yeah, I guess like capoeira movies in general would be Brazilian, except a lot of capoeira movies. Well, a lot of capoeira is choreographed by Chinese guys, and so you don't necessarily have the. Because I think Besoro has a Chinese choreographer. Yeah, Elite Squad. That was it. That was a Brazilian film. I think as a film, Elite Squad is far more compelling than those other martial art movies, just because it sort of like it kind of has its own language to it, because it's dealing with the grittiness, that sort of like gray area between cop and civilian, right? And that's reality. there is an interesting there is an interesting story to play there with capoeira and slavery and whatnot. But I think that if you were to do a proper capoeira movie, I think you need to kind of like consider. You probably need to go a little bit deeper than just saying that it was a slave form to escape being noticed. Like I think it seems more accurate that like it's because it seems like the myth going right now with capoeira is that it was just this thing, right? Whereas it could have been legitimately just the dance, and it could have also, and it probably also has a lot of real spiritual roots to it, right? Anthropologically, I think it's more interesting than like the martial art, Black Belt Magazine is making it out. So if you really wanted to do like a proper capoeira movie, I would put that stuff in. I think that stuff is just as important. Just like Spooky Encounters, right? Spooky Encounters does this whole, it's a whole smattering of everything. It's not just the Chinese martial arts, but it's also the possession, and it's a comedy with the possession, right? And Sammo went there, and I think that you kind of have to be ballsy and just go there and just show like, hey, this is what was going on and this is what was behind it. I don't really know much about capoeira, but I would like to see something that's like a deeper level capoeira movie. Looking forward to someone bringing back the Aikido movie. Seagal did it. We have the tools and the talent out there to make it great. Yeah, what was that movie, Throwdown, with Aaron Kwok, where everybody does judo, or everybody does Aikido. I guess that wasn't an Aikido movie. It was a judo movie. Let's see, Martinez. You stated Indian martial art movies. That's a hard one to sell me. Not that you need me to watch, but is there a selling point that's unique to movies? Well, okay. I don't quite have a good handle right now, I'll admit, on Indian cinema in general, but from what I understand, you have Bollywood, which is this very heroic comic book, and in a lot of ways very American. And there's actually a lot of kind of like Western motifs there, right? There's the horses. It's very, it's very predicated upon a character kind of like blazing a trail, and people just kind of like flying off away from him. And then you have the southern like Malayalam cinema, where things are a little bit more grounded. And I'm not quite sure what that's about. But there's more to Indian cinema than just the goofy, hero stuff. I think that there might be, a real sort of movement toward gritty action films. Like Lee Whitaker is doing some interesting stuff. He's doing like one takes that are kind of gritty fight scenes. And he works in, Tamil cinema, Tollywood. And those are some great actors also. And he can attest to the fact that like they can draw from, in Mollywood, you can draw from kind of a more serious action style that's available to them. Also, South India, Kerala, and the Mollywood region, Malayalam cinema, that's the home of Kalaripayat, which is this Indian martial arts style. And Kalaripayat claims to be sort of the original martial arts style, and it kind of looks like wushu. It looks like old wushu, with like partner sparring sets and whatnot. But I think that it's going to be a mistake to just do those movement sets. I think that if you could reverse engineer Kalaripayat, because Kalaripayat is so ritualized now that I don't really know how you would use that in a fight anymore. You're just going to show partner sparring sets, and nobody's going to be impressed. I'm sorry, it's just not going to look good. You have to then kind of like reverse engineer Kalaripayat and say like, okay, what was the warfare that caused this martial arts system, which then became encoded over time in order to make itself look less harmful to the government, for example, right? Like you have to reverse it and figure out what it was that makes it deadly, and then do that. Don't just do the Kalari movement. Like do the deadly stuff. Take the thinking that goes into Kalari, and then back up in time 1,000 years, and figure out like what warfare would have actually looked like. I don't know if anybody's quite doing it yet. I am interested to see what comes out of South India, though. Any horror martial art recommendations? Spooky Encounters, probably the best one. There's another one. Somebody can probably point to it. It has Chin Suho. It's recent. I think it's 2008. I can't remember what it's called. I'll dig it up. Chin Suho. Somebody's probably gonna come up with it before me. Let's see, what is it called? It's recent. Rigor Mortis, 2013. It's got some really interesting movement and really interesting action because again, like they're tying the martial arts back to the sorcery, and that's the stuff that I'm really interested in now, because once you do that, once you admit the connection, once you admit that there's a connection between martial arts and sorcery or divination or astrology or whatever it is, okay, well now you've given yourself license to move like that again. Because if you're just talking about Chinese martial arts, like, well, it's just, we looked at a praying mantis and we decided that this works, and so we do this for an arm block, and it becomes, Black Belt Magazine tutorial. Well, then you're like, then you just lose vocabulary. But if you tie it back to its origins, then you get a lot of movement. You get some really interesting stuff. Kung Fu versus Zombies. Oh yeah, that's the other one, the one that I put out. Darren, hey man, how about fight scenes where technique is intentionally not as clean and crisp, like Crow Zero or Old Boy or Once Upon a Time in High School, where adrenaline and exhaustion is part of the choreo? Yeah, there's some great some of the American fights would do that really well. They would choreograph exhaustion into the fights. The Hunted with Tommy Lee Jones, some good injury choreography in that. I think Korean fights do a pretty good job just in general. I don't think that they're not too concerned with the aesthetics. They're much more concerned about the story and like moving a character forward to the scene, right? And it's not important for them that the character be, moving clean and crisp at the all through the fight. Whereas in Hong Kong films, it's like, okay, if the character's going to be tired, then he needs to move in an aesthetically tired way, right? But that's not a rule within Korean and American action. Also, there's some like amazing Chambara fights like Harakiri, where it's like almost from the beginning, like the guy's exhausted, and it's pure desperation. Kind of randoms from Gordon. I've noticed some of the smaller Blu-ray companies are starting to release nice remasters of Hong Kong films. Do you think there might be a resurgence in this style of action? I think while we are all still alive, yeah. But I don't know how the Hong Kong style can continue on, because opera is pretty much dead. And it's kind of like, it's kind of like, I mean, it's kind of sad to think of it like this, but it is kind of like vaudeville, right? Where the physical comedy, it's not only is it difficult to do, like it's really hard doing a Hong Kong style action movie. Like it's really hard. You have to coordinate departments in a way that's not like, it's not as profitable anymore. It's like really hard to do, especially like in a plug and play studio system like Netflix and Amazon. Like you can't. It's a miracle when you can do a Hong Kong style action scene. Like the only way that we really pulled it off with Man Who Feels No Pain, which is on Netflix. It's not a Netflix movie, but the reason we could pull it off is because it was in India, and I edited the fights for free. Like, maybe the fights would have ended up fine if I hadn't edited them, and Dennis edited some of them as well. But like, we just knew, we're like, well, we have to be able to edit the fights because we don't know what's going to happen, and we did the sound design and everything. So I don't know. I mean, I think we enjoy it while it lasts. There's always going to be. By the way, it'll always be there, right? It'll always be there as a. It's always going to be in history. There's always going to be the history of Chinese combat. So you can always fall back on that, and you can also fall back on it in the guise of a dance, right? Like as a dance style in a movie. Like if you were to do a musical, then like the shapes based martial arts just makes sense suddenly, right? So I think if you pull it away from like pure seriousness and you have fun with it, like Kung Fu Hustle, for example, then yeah, I think it's got a life. I think it's gonna be really difficult otherwise though, because I don't think you can go back to the sort of sorcery system that the KMT kind of destroyed, because you don't have a legitimate reason anymore for doing shapes. That's going to be in part 2 of this also. You'll see. And then Kung Fu Zombies. Oh, sorry, Kung Fu Zombies with Billy Chong, 1981. Okay, Kung Fu and Sorcery. You know what? I don't think I've seen that. I got to put that on my list. Thanks for the recommendation. I'm gonna make sure I look at Kung Fu Zombies with Billy Chong. Billy Chong's one of my favorites. Indonesian guy. Indonesian Chinese. How about Crazy Samurai Musashi as an experiment? Is that a game? I'm not quite sure what that is. Legendary On. Do you follow Tak Sakaguchi's work, famous for verses? Yeah. Reborn's got some interesting stuff. He. I hope he gets it directed by like a non-Japanese director. I think that would be good. He did a great film though. Hold on. No, I take that back. Those Who Go to Hell is a really fun action film about filmmaking, about this crazy filmmaker who like teams up with Yakuza to make the craziest action film, and so the Yakuza become his like production team. And Tak has a great role as like a Bruce Lee impersonator in it, and he's kind of a tragic hero in a sense because he's kind of faking it, whereas like these Yakuza are doing it for real all around him. So yeah, he's done some awesome stuff. Hi Eric, the movie Nobody has some tasty fight scenes. Still haven't seen it. Thanks for the recommendation. Pinoy, are you a professor in a college? If so, what major? I'm not a teacher. But if I were to teach, I don't know what I would teach. Probably PE. Thomas, isn't it sad that Thai scenes just kind of died? But it was like a brain drain almost, right? Like it was kind of a brain drain. A lot of the Tony Jaa went to Hong Kong and America where the money's better. Panna died. He and Panna had a falling out. I don't know what happened there. That's probably a whole other. That's actually that's movement style also, as an example. Like the Thai guys were also able to like come over to the States, and there weren't many of them. Not to the States, they did that too, but into Hong Kong, they could move just like the Hong Kong guys, and they were just as friggin' balls out, eating concrete with their falls, and a lot of the Thai guys, their Muay Thai demos are like they're choreographed, right? But they would do like gnarly falls in their Muay Thai demos, and so it was just sort of like it was just sort of an easy step for Panna to take that kind of choreography and do his old films like Born to Fight and Pluk. Some amazing fights that those guys did, but I think like just their willingness to just smash each other it's sort of like made its own movement language. But like if you don't have to do that, right? If like you have the choice to make like a couple bucks doing another Panna movie where I'm gonna get kicked in the head a few times, or I could go to Hong Kong and work for 3 weeks and make a ton of money and not get kicked in the head. Maybe I'll do that. And so it's just you're naturally gonna have a brain drain as a result. I also don't know like what's gonna happen with Indonesia. I mean, is Indonesia's action cinema thriving? I don't know. I haven't really heard anything coming out of there recently that's any good. Kung Fu vs. Zombies from S. Eric Hermo. Do you kill something that's already dead? How do you kill something that's already dead? Yeah, exactly. That's why you just pin it to the wall and leave it. Sleepy Potato. I'm an animator and practicing fight scene by watching movies. Do you have an animated favorite fight? Oh yeah, one of my favorite animated fights is the Golgo 13 fight in the elevator. And I probably shouldn't do too many more of these. I'm sure Chris wants to go right now. Here, there's this fight in Golgo 13 that I love, and that just came in. Russell Williams. What would you do to make the Netflix live action Last Airbenders shows action sequences work? I never watched the show Last Airbender. Um, I don't know, man. I have no idea. That'll be a tough one. Um, I think I think that I think that if I'm gonna touch anything with sorcery, like it has to come from some old real place. And anytime you deal with like five elements stuff, right? Then a lot of that comes from alchemy and weapon forging and medicine and all that. And I don't know if I don't know if that research has already been done with Last Airbender. I think it seems to me that they just sort of like took it from this like mythological angle right away. Um, so if there's something to draw from there, great, I would draw from that. Otherwise, I would have to like make that. I'd have to justify it because otherwise, somebody who's doing rock style martial arts, well, okay, I'm not just gonna do the aesthetic of a rock. Like, what does it actually mean to involve the element of a rock? Okay, well, what does that mean regarding what does that mean regarding like weaponsmithing, right? What does that mean regarding architecture? So I don't know. Seems like a lot of work, and they'd probably get tired of me. Spidey Sensei, Eric, what's your opinion of French movie District 13? Thought the movie would explode a new wave of action, but seemed to miss any audience. I don't know. At least in my circles, like everyone knew District B13, and then also like I don't think parkour was really popular until that movie came out. You know, like did that come out? District B13. So when did that come out? That came out 2004, and then James Bond Parkour, right? So 2004 was a long time ago, and you can keep in mind how long parkour has kind of been in the vernacular. It's been about that long. So even though, Casino Royale in 2006 has that opening parkour chase, um, that scene wouldn't exist if it weren't for District B13. Yeah, okay, fine, B13 did it first, but you're gonna, it's gonna be popularized by James Bond. It's just the nature of it. But I don't think James Bond would have even noticed it had it not been something cool that they could tap into. Although then the question is still like, how do you use parkour functionally in an action movie, right? Like they did a newer B13. I can't remember what it was called. It was really bad. But then, yeah, you outside of a very kind of punk rock / mythical world in a game like Mirror's Edge, also like Assassin's Creed was inspired by it. So I think it actually did have a lot more influence, but it was probably spread like thinner lower down, right? It wasn't like you had a bunch of new parkour movies, because like if you try and make a parkour movie, that's hard. It's really hard to do that. It's hard to justify people running around and like backflipping off of walls. So, all right, that is all. Thank you all. John. All right, last one. Do you think the formal establishment of a system like parkour ruined the inventiveness of, say, Jackie Chan climbing? Maybe. I don't know. I mean, but you're not gonna have. I mean, it really is just kind of like that era. Because remember, Yamakasi comes out in 2001, and not many people were paying. People in the industry noticed Yamakasi in 2001. That was the first. That was like the prequel to District Beast 13 in spirit, and it had like 2 minutes of parkour. So those of like people in the industry noticed it, and then B13 came out. Everyone went, oh my gosh. That's why I think that it was like more popular than that. But I think that that's just sort of like a natural outgrowth of mass media. Like that's what happened with tricking, right? Tricking martial arts, and it became an institution as well. but like it's just naturally going to do that. Like first of all, it starts with some kind of catalog. Like with tricking, it was Bailang or these other Juji Mufu back when he was a skinny guy, and they just listed every tricking martial art move, and then it became codified in like a competitive sense. And I think parkour had a competitive scene as well. And then you have classes and all that, and so that's just kind of like naturally develops, I think, as a result of mass media. But all that's to say, like Jackie Chan's parkour stuff is still like the best stuff because it's so damn like practical. It's not an aesthetic. It's a reason to go from here to there, and that then became an aesthetic. And then people started teaching that move in a class. Like, here's this kind of move, and then like people just do that move now in order to like go over a trash can. Well, you kind of like lost the spirit of it, right? Lost the character. But I think that's just naturally going to be the case with, movement systems in general, I guess. Okay, that is it. Seriously, thank you all, and I will. I'm going to start working on the next episode, but first I'm going to go home and have some dinner.